This is the BYD Dolphin Surf, and it could be the EV that you've been waiting for, because it undercuts cars like the Citroën EC3 and the Renault 5 by thousands of pounds. But this isn't some tiny city runaround like a Dacia Spring. It can fit tall adults in the back. It has an official range of up to 200 miles. And apparently it has the most powerful electric motor in its class. But is it any good? That's what we're going to be finding out in this review, so stay watching and don't forget to subscribe to the What Car channel for lots more videos like this one. Right, let's start with a name, because you might be wondering if this is some special surfing edition of the BYD Dolphin with, I don't know, a mount for a board on the roof. But that isn't the case at all. This is a completely different and much smaller car, and it's called different things in different parts of the world. So in some countries, this goes by the name of the Dolphin Mini, and back in its homeland in China, it's actually called the BYD Seagull. But of course, seagulls aren't universally loved in Britain, which is why BYD has gone for the name Dolphin Surf. Anyway, how big is it? Well, as I said a moment ago, this is smaller than the Dolphin. That's about 4.3 meters long and a rival to the MG4 and the Renault Megane. This is just under 4 meters long, so it's almost exactly the same size as an EC3 or a Renault 5, and about 30 centimeters longer than a Dacia Spring. And that means it's far roomier in the back. On the screen, you should see some footage of me in the back of a Leapmotor T03 and a Dacia Spring. And this, well, it's like a limo by comparison. I have a decent amount of knee room, I would say. Also very good foot space. This seat in front is set up for my driving position. It is as low as it will possibly go. And look at that, I can move my feet around quite easily, don't feel clamped to the floor like they do in some cars. In fact, this is actually slightly better in the back than a Renault 5 for someone of my height, because I've got a little bit more knee room and also headroom. It's only if I lean right back in the seat and try and use this head restraint does my head get anywhere near the ceiling. It's also fairly light and airy in here. We've got a good view out. Okay, this shoulder line does rise up towards the rear of the car. That takes away a little bit of that feeling of light and space. But by class standards, this is certainly one of the better options. And because these rear seat backs are quite reclined, I could sit here for a fairly long journey and be quite happy. It's also worth pointing out that you get a flat floor. There is no annoying tunnel getting in the way of your feet. And also, all versions of the Dolphin Surf come with 3 Isofix mounting points for child seats. You get one on each rear seat and one on the front passenger seat. Although this is a strict 4-seater. Cars like the Renault 5 and the Citroën EC3, they're a little bit wider and they have 3 seat belts in the back. So you can technically carry 5, although the middle person wouldn't be very comfortable at all. But in the Dolphin Surf, it's strictly for 4. Now, the boot. Officially, there is 308 litres of luggage space in here, according to the VDA measuring system. Sorry to get a bit nerdy here, but it is important to mention that because some manufacturers, including Dacia and Renault, tend to quote figures using a different measuring system to make their boots seem bigger than they actually are. But assuming we're using the same VDA system, which is effectively loading small blocks into the boot and counting how many fit, then this has a bigger boot than both a Dacia Spring and a Renault 5, and it's only a few litres down on a Citroën EC3. We managed to fit 5 carry-on suitcases into the boot of one of those below the parcel shelf. This car doesn't actually need one because of how reclined the rear seats are. Now, clearly this isn't the biggest boot in the world, and you might look in that and think, well, that's not particularly great, but you can flip up the boot floor and that reveals a huge well underneath, which is very useful for stowing the charging cables. If you need even more space, then you can fold down these rear seats. They split 50-50, very easy to do that. You just pull this toggle and shove the seat forwards. Although, as you can see, that does leave quite a big step in the floor of the extended low bay. And of course, there's quite a big lip at the boot entrance too. The Dolphin Surf doesn't have a front boot either, but by class standards, there's still plenty of space for luggage in here. So the Dolphin is big enough to take you and a couple of mates on a short holiday, but will it take you days to get there because of a rubbish range and really slow charging speeds? Well, it does depend which version of the Surf you go for, because the entry-level active version has a battery with a usable capacity of just 30 kilowatt hours, which isn't very big at all. It has an official range of just 136 miles, and that's actually slightly worse than a Dacia Spring or a Leapmotor T03. And of course, you won't actually even get that far in rear-wheel driving, particularly if you venture anywhere near a motorway. And on top of that, the maximum charging rate of 65 kilowatts isn't great either. Yes, it's faster than a Spring or a T03, but you'll still be waiting at least half an hour for a 10 to 80% top up. Now the mid-spec Boost version actually has the best range of any Dolphin Surf. It can do up to 200 miles on a charge thanks to its larger 43.2 kilowatt hour battery. That is fractionally better than an EC3 or an entry-level urban range Renault 5, although more expensive Renault 5s can do around 250 miles on a charge. The Boost can also accept a faster peak charging rate of 85 kilowatts, although you'll still be waiting around half an hour for a 10 to 80% charge because, of course, you'll be filling up a bigger battery. The only annoying thing about the Boost is that you get the same 87 brake horsepower electric motor as the entry-level Active, and because it has a bigger, heavier battery, that means it's slower. It can officially do 0 to 62 in 12.1 seconds, which isn't very fast. If you want more power, you can have it, but you'll have to go for this range-topping comfort version. That mixes the larger 43.2 kilowatt hour battery with a more powerful 150 brake horsepower electric motor. We'll be finding out how fast that is when we go for a drive a little bit later on, but on paper, you do lose a few miles of range. This can officially do 192 miles on a charge. The battery chemistry in the Dolphin Surf also deserves a special mention because, like other BYD models, it has a Blade lithium iron phosphate or LFP battery, and that's even safer than regular lithium ion batteries. It also won't degrade as quickly if you regularly charge it to 100%, and it doesn't have any cobalt in it. Now let's talk prices, because clearly money, or at least value for money, is one of the main reasons you might be considering a Dolphin Surf. Exact UK prices haven't been announced yet, but we have it on pretty good authority that the entry-level Active version will cost just under £19,000. That is quite a bit more than a Dacia Spring or Elite Motor TO3, but it's around £4,000 less than an entry-level Renault 5 and around £3,000 less than the cheapest Citroën EC3. And it isn't as though you get barely any standard equipment, because all versions come with rear parking sensors, a rear view camera, keyless entry, vehicle to load and manual air conditioning. You do have to go for at least the mid-spec Boost if you want rain-sensing windscreen wipers, alloy wheels and electric front seats though. That's expected to cost around 22k. Finally, this range-topping comfort adds tinted rear windows, LED headlights, heated front seats and a 360-degree parking camera, but it is expected to push the price up to around £24,000, although remember, you do get that more powerful electric motor. Now, before we have a look inside, I want to know what you think of the looks of the Dolphin Surf. Do you prefer its sharp, angular styling over the retro vibe looks of the Renault 5 and the Mini, for example, or the more quirky Hyundai Insta? Let us know in the comments below. And before you do, it's worth knowing that this lime green paint, which looks more like a yellow to me, comes as standard on all trim levels. Although if you think it's a bit too bright, you can have a light blue, a black or a white instead. Right, in the front of the Dolphin Surf, and the first thing to point out is that it does feel quite narrow in here. This is a slightly narrower car than a Citroën EC3 or a Renault 5, and it does feel it because this B pillar here is quite close to my shoulder, and also this big floating centre console in the middle just makes you feel slightly hemmed in. This does act as a nice armrest when you're driving along though, but the armrest on the door, for someone of my height at least, is pretty pointless because if I go to use it, well, my elbow's nowhere near it at all. I think I'd have to sit quite a lot further towards the steering wheel before I could reach that at all. But otherwise, the driving position is fundamentally quite good. The pedals, the steering wheel and the seat all line up nicely with one another on this left-hand drive version at least, and unlike a Dacia Spring where the steering wheel only moves up and down, in the Dolphin Surf, it also moves in and out, so it's pretty easy to get comfortable, especially because you get electric seats as long as you avoid entry-level Active trim. You don't, though, get adjustable lumbar support on any version of the Dolphin Surf, and that is a bit of a shame because lower back support could be better. And on a long journey, we've done a few miles so far today, and I have found myself wanting a little bit more lower back support. But then again, not many cars in this class have adjustable lumbar support. One of the few that does is the Renault 5, but that is quite a bit more expensive than this. Now, infotainment, you get the same basic system as you do on other BYD models. The only difference is that the touchscreen is smaller. So this measures 10.1 inches, but otherwise it's easy to use, quite quick to respond, easy to reach actually from the driver's seat too. And it has BYD's party trick of being able to rotate itself. You can do that by either pressing an icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen or a button on the steering wheel. Although really that is of limited use, particularly if you use Apple CarPlay, because you can't rotate the screen when you're using CarPlay. So probably you're going to be in landscape mode most of the time. But as I say, other than that, this is a pretty good infotainment system by class standards. You may have noticed there aren't really any physical controls for the air conditioning. You can turn it off and on, and you can activate air conditioning, but if you want to change the temperature or the fan speed, you do have to do that either using the touchscreen here or the voice control system. But actually there is a shortcut to do that on the touchscreen. You get 3 fingers, you put them on the screen and you drag them up and down to change the temperature, and if you swipe left or right, then that changes the fan speed. So that is pretty handy. It is worth pointing out though that you can't have climate control on any Dolphin Surf, so you can't set a temperature and have the car automatically maintain that, but you do get manual air conditioning on all versions. So you can blow warm or cold air into the interior to get the temperature pretty much how you want it. Now let's talk about quality, because for class standards, I'd say this is actually fairly good. Yes, there are some hard plastics in here on the tops of the doors, on most of the dashboard, but there is also what's probably best described as a wetsuit material. I don't know if that's a nod to the surfing vibe, but it certainly feels like that. It isn't particularly thick or dense. It's not the most expensive or plush feeling material that you will ever lay your hands on, but it is nicer than hard plastics, and it just makes the interior feel a little more upmarket. And everything feels fairly solid in here too. So as I say, for class standards, this has a perfectly acceptable interior and certainly way nicer than what you get in Elite Motor TO3 or a Dacia Spring. Storage is also very good. There are 2 cup holders here on this floating center console. If you go for range topping comfort trim, which is what this car is, you will get a wireless phone charging pad as well. And underneath this console, there is a huge tray, which could prove very useful for throwing phones, wallets, sweets, whatever else you want to stash away. On top of that, there is another small cubby on this door armrest, which could be useful for throwing coins in, and some fairly decent sized door pins. It's also worth pointing out that all versions of the Dolphin Surf come with vegan, or in other words, plastic seats as standard. Now, BYD says that this comfort version of the Dolphin Surf has the most powerful electric motor in its class. You might point out that a Mini Cooper SE has 215 brake horsepower, and that is technically in the same class as this, but it's also a lot more expensive. So we will let that slide, because this indeed does have 150 brake horsepower, and that is more than a Renault 5, a Citroën EC3, or a Hyundai Insta. But does it translate to better performance? Well, as luck would have it, I have a piece of sophisticated timing gear connected up to the car. I have a long, straight piece of road ahead of me, so let's find out. Acceleration certainly feels pretty strong, given the class, and we have hit 0 to 60 in 8.28 seconds. That is quicker than this car can officially go. The official time is 0 to 62, of course, in 9.1 seconds, but 8.28, not bad at all. So performance is perfectly fine, quite good in fact by class standards. What is the rest of the driving experience like? Well, it's a little bit mixed, if I'm honest. Let's start with the amount of pitch there is in the car. So if you accelerate quite quickly, you'll notice the nose of the car rear up, and when you brake, and I'm not talking about doing an emergency stop, but just moderately quickly for a tight corner on a country road like this, then the nose does dive down towards the road quite noticeably. And on top of that, there isn't a huge amount of grip in this car. It's nice and dry and sunny now, but earlier on, it was pouring with rain, and you do notice you can't carry a huge amount of speed through corners. But these things are relative. This is more competent, more confidence inspiring on a road like this, and it has more accurate, better weighted steering than a Dacia Spring or Elite Motor TO3. But compared to something like a Renault 5 or a Mini or even a Hyundai Insta, then it doesn't stack up quite so well. Another disappointing thing is the brake pedal. If you want to slow down very gently, then it's quite easy to do that. But if you want to slow down a little bit faster, again, for a tighter corner on a road like this, then you will find that they can quickly become quite grabby, and it makes it difficult to know or to judge how much pressure you need to apply to slow down smoothly. So that isn't ideal. And the ride, it's a little bit choppy at all speeds, but this car can get quite out of shape if you hit a pothole or expansion joints. The roads actually out here in Rome aren't brilliant, and certainly compared with a Renault 5, that just feels more grown up. It deals with bumps better, as does a Hyundai Insta, but this feels like a Rolls Royce compared to a TO3 or a Dacia Spring. So really, it's a question of you pays your money, you takes your choice. So we know the likely prices, we know how much equipment this comes with, and now we know what it's like to drive. One thing we don't know is the Euro NCAP safety rating. Now this does come with a lot of standard safety equipment, and BYD says that it's aiming for a 4-star rating. If that's the case, then this will score the same as the Renault 5. It's very difficult for tiny electric cars like this to score the full 5 stars. We will be testing this against a couple of rivals back in the UK in the coming weeks. We'll go into far more depth about the efficiency and the range of this car versus some of its competitors, and if you hit subscribe, we'll let you know as soon as that video goes live. What I can say right now though is that this plugs a very obvious hole in the electric car market, certainly in the UK, because it is way better than cheaper options like the Dacia Spring and the Leapmotor T03. And while it's not as sophisticated, particularly on the road, as a Renault 5 or a Hyundai Insta, it is a lot cheaper than both of those cars. Thanks for watching this review. If you want to watch another one, click up there. And for our full detailed written review of the Dolphin Surf, head to whatcar.com by clicking there.